Welcome to the final Friday of October, Friday Night Frights. It is October 31st, the haunting night of all of the year. I am your host, the Count. I am so wiped out from all the candy that I've been eating. It's Count Vampire is the name. I've been just eating so many sweet ladies. It's just got me sugar buzzed, as you call it here in the 21st century. I'm coming to you live from the Joe Motion Videos 82 dungeon. Wait a second. Never mind. I'm coming to you dead from the dungeon in Joe Motion Video Studios dungeon. We will be reading more of these stories than just 3 tonight, being the Halloween extravaganza. Ha 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 ha. Well, let's get started. Story number 1. Hoo-Ha's. And I thought that was something different. It's a restaurant called Hoo-Ha's, right? Where the women dress in the little shorty shirts and they call themselves the Hoo-Ha girls, right? No? What is it? Oh, I can't say that. Thank you, Mr. Editor. It's a Hoo-Ha. This thing right here. These scary stories will take you on a strange and fearsome journey, where darkness, fog, and mist, or sounds of a person screaming, or a dog howling, in ordinary places into nightmare places. They're going all over. They must have their Visa card. It's everywhere you want it to be, where nothing is what you expect, especially when your Visa card's maxed out and you have no way to get home. Have people been telling scary stories for a long time? Anyone knows. From the first, they were tales of supernatural creatures, kind of like me, Count Vampire, but I'm not supernatural. I'm super organic. That people feared would harm them. Boogeymen, monsters, and demons, and ghosts, and devils, and sprites, and spirits that lurk in the dark, waiting for chances to strike. That they do. We still tell stories about creatures we hear, but none of them are all boogeymen and demons. Quite a few are about living people. You'll need some of them, a fat, jolly butcher, a jolly rancher, which I like. They're pretty sweet. I like a jolly rancher, but I chip my teeth on the jolly ranchers all the time, so I prefer the old salty ones. A friendly girl who plays the drum, a neighbor, and others too, at best, are not to be trusted. The scary stories of this kind often have serious purpose, and many warn young women about the strangers that await them when they are out in the world on their own. I had that talk with my daughter the other day. I said, kick them on the bollocks if anything happens. I even gave her a taser to tase the bollocks if anything happens. But for the most part, we tell scary stories to have fun, to warn out the light, to turn out the lights, and we leave just a candle burning in the wind. Oh, that's Elton John. I'm sorry, sir. Leave just a candle burning. When we sit close together and tell the scariest stories we know, often these include some that have been passed down from 100 years. I've passed down some scary stories too, and believe me, they lasted 100 years or more. If a scary story is scary enough, your flesh begins to creep. You get a shivery, shaking feeling to your bones. You imagine hearing and seeing things. I think we all have. You should hold your breath as long as you wait to learn how to see how it all ends. But if something happens, everyone gasps and jumps and screams. Some people call those shivery, shaky, screamy feeling and heebie-jeebies. I get the heebie-jeebies quite a bit. I buy them in a grocery store in a box. The heebie-jeebies on milk are so tasty. You've got to try the heebie-jeebies. Made by the Loch Ness Monster Incorporation. Or the Screamy Mimis. I dated a Screamy Mimi. Every time I looked at her, she screamed and said, "Oh, me, me, me." So, she was no fun, though. And the poet T.S. Eliot called them hoo-ha's. Hoo-ha's what? Nobody gets me. You better read the stories in the dark while you are feeling the brave and dark, and before it gets dark. And then when on the moon in its tip, tell them you feed your friends in captivities, you gravely dispose of them, ha ha ha. And then you have fun. They have fun, and so will you. That came from Princeton, New Jersey, by Alvin Schwartz. Here's the next one. Isn't that such a cute little bat? When she saw him, she screamed and ran. I often get that response from women, or they just smile and say, "Oh, no thank you." Who knows what condition they will be in after the date, don't you know? This chapter is filled with ghost stories. In one, a man has become a ghost and he doesn't know it yet. Another, a pirate ship crew returned from a watery grave and they were frightful screams. Doesn't that familiar? Number one, something was wrong. One morning, John Sullivan found himself walking down a dead stairway. He should explain that he was down there and how he got out of there. Pardon me. For being undead, I am pretty thirsty. And my girlfriend has me on a light diet. Light blood. It's so light it's clear. She might as well just give me plasma. Great taste, less filling. He could not explain what he was doing down there, or how he got there, or wherever he had been earlier. He didn't even know what time it was. He saw a woman working down behind him. He stepped by her. It was afraid I had forgotten my watch. Don't you ever do that, forget your watch, and you feel naked throughout the rest of the day? He said and smiled. "Can you tell me the time?" When she saw him, she screamed and ran. I think he forgot more than his watch, don't you? John Silverman noticed that other people were afraid of him. When they saw him coming, they flattened themselves against the wall of a building or ran across the street to stay out of his way. Must have been something wrong with me, John Sullivan said to himself, so he started sniffing his armpits. I'd better be going home now, he says. He hailed a taxi, but the driver took one look at him and sped away. John Sullivan did not understand what was happening, and it scared him. Maybe somebody at home can tell me, he thought. He found a telephone and called his wife, and her voice he did not recognize. Could not recognize the answer. Mrs. Sullivan there? He asked. She is at a funeral, the voice said. His Mrs. Sullivan was killed yesterday. It was an accident in downtown. There's always an accident in downtown. Called uptown, everything will be all right. The wreck. Fred and Jean went to the same high school, but they met for the first time in a Christmas dance. Fred had come by himself, and he had Jean. Soon Fred began Fred had come by himself, so he had Jeannie. So Fred decided that Jeannie was one of the nicest girls he had ever met, and they danced together most often. At 11 o'clock, Jeannie said, I have to leave now. Can you give me a ride? Accidentally, Jimmy drove his car into a tree. That's a shame. Hit the poles, but don't hit the trees. They did nothing to you. On the way over there. And Jeannie said, I guess I wasn't paying attention. Fred drove down to the head of the body of the road. It was where the neighbor had said she had knew her boss very well. Oops, I lost my place. Fred drove her to the head of the road. It was a neighbor he didn't know well about, but he didn't drop her off. Then the road ahead was so bad condition, I could walk from here. Fred stopped the car and held out some tinsel. Have some, he said. I got it at the dance. Oh, thank you, she said. I'll put it in my hair. And she did. You ever tie the tinsel in your hair? You know, back in the early 2000s, the girls put the little tinsel. It looked cute. Would you like to go out sometime to a movie or something? Fred asked. Oh, that would be fun, Jean said. After Fred drove off, he realized he did not know Jean's last name or telephone her. I'll go back, he thought. The road couldn't have been that bad. He drove slowly down Brady Road through the thick woods, and there wasn't a sign of Jean. As he came to the curve, he saw the wreckage of a car ahead, and it had crashed into a tree and caught fire. Smoke was rising from above. Fred made his way back to the car. He carried someone trapped down, crushed against the steering wheel and a coolant pump. It was Jeannie. What a terrible loss. and in her hair was a Christmas tinsel he had given her. Look at that lonely road. One more story, then we will conclude Friday Night Frights for 2020. One Sunday morning, I always went to the 7 o'clock Sunday session. That's 1. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, morning session. That's why they don't have me ring the bell no more. Sunday morning service at church. Usually she heard the changing of the church bells while she was eating breakfast. But the next morning she heard while she was still in bed. That means I am late. If you're 15 minutes early, you're never late. Ida jumped out of bed, quickly dressed, and ran without eating or looking back at the clock. But it was still dark, and it was unusually as dark in the hallway this year. Ida was used to coming home on the street, and the only sounds came from where the birds chattered and lost their stone, clattered of all over her shoes on the pavement. Everybody must be ready to be at church, she thought. Quickly, she took a shortcut through the cemetery, where she had quickly slipped into the church and found a seat. The service had already begun. When she caught her breath, she looked at the ground, and the church was filled with people she had never seen before. But before the woman next to her did look at her father, Ida smiled at her. It's Joseph Carr, she thought. But she's already dead. What's going on here? She smiled. As she died a month ago, suddenly felt uneasy. She looked down again. As her eyes began to adjust to the dim light, Ida saw some skeletons in suits and dresses. My kind of skeletons, don't you know that? In the service of the dead, Ida thought, everybody is dead except me. The idea noticed that some of them were staring at her and looking angry as if she had no business to be there. Stephanie cursed and leaned toward her mother and whispered, leave right after the benediction if you care about your life. And the service came to an end, and the minister gave his blessings. And bless the Lord and keep you, he said. The Lord must be to his face to shine before upon the Ida Stadium. Grabbing his coat and walked quickly toward the door where he heard footsteps behind him. She glanced back. Several of the dead were coming down towards her. Others were sitting up to join them. The Lord lifted up his countenance to you, the minister went on. Ida was so frightened she began to run, but the door she ran with was packed with shrieks and ghouls at her heels. Get out! One of them screamed. Another shouted, you don't belong here! And ripped her throat away. And Ida ran through the cemetery. A third grabbed her hat from her head. Don't come back! It screamed. And she looked at his arms. The idea Ida reached on the screen was the sun was fishing, and it had been deep. They had disappeared. That dream, one of Ida's friends brought over her coat and hat, and she was left, or what was left of them, they had been found in the cemetery, torn into shreds. Who do you think turned dear old sweet Ida's clothes into shreds? Did she do it in a drunken stupor and forgot? Was she scared and tore them on the fence? Or did a minion of the undead find her and tear her clothes to pieces to recruit them for the werewolf coven? A vampire coven? I need recruits. I'm a recruit of one. So let these stories sink in this most terrible and dreadful of nights. Halloween night, All Hallows Eve, Samhain as some call it. And remember, my dearest friends, if your hot dog has a first name, it is Oscar Mayer. If you don't wash your hands, you could get sicker quicker. If you don't wear a mask, tell me, which size tracheostomy tube you wear? Because I will be glad to give you one. Fit right there. So wear a mask and not find out. This has been Lord and Count Vampire signing off for the year. And if you so dare and choose, select that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications of when Joe Motion Videos 82 videos pop up. He is a good toy reviewer and a very dear friend of mine. When he reaches 500, he will be holding a giveaway. Till then, stay spooky, my friends, and especially stay safe. And stay away from open flame if you know what's good for you.